"Don't embarrass me," my daughter whispered, pulling me gently but firmly away from the microphone. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. We were standing in a school auditorium, surrounded by bright paper crafts and folding chairs, sunlight pouring in through tall windows that hadn't been cleaned in what looked like decades. A kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Palmer, I think, had just asked if any grandparents wanted to share a few words during the Grandparents' Day assembly. Nothing dramatic, a few kind sentences about family or what it meant to be a grandparent. My grandson Noah had nudged me with that same eager grin he's had since he was 2. "You should do it, Grandpa." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a kind of hope that made it impossible to say no. So I stood up, knees aching more than usual, and walked toward the microphone. That's when Claire stopped me. She stepped into my path so casually, it almost seemed like an accident. One hand on my arm, polished nails resting lightly on the fabric of my jacket sleeve. Her face still smiling, the way she does when she wants people to think everything's perfect. She leaned in close, and that's when she said it. "Don't embarrass me." There was no malice in her voice. That would have been easier, I think. It wasn't cruel, just tight, like she was holding something back. Her lips barely moved, her eyes scanned the room, not looking at me, but at the people sitting in the audience. Daniel, her husband, watched her from the second row, a neutral expression on his face. The kind of look people wear when they know better than to get involved. I blinked, unsure I'd heard her right. I'd spoken in front of hundreds of people in my life, company presentations, community meetings, even a wedding toast once for her college roommate. But something about the way she said it made my hands go cold. I waited for her to laugh, to tell me she was joking, but she just gave me that polished, camera-ready smile and nodded toward the stage. As if I should understand. I don't remember what I said up there. Something about Noah, about how proud I was to be his grandfather, about how he liked bugs and outer space and asking questions nobody could answer. I think I said something about how quickly time passes, about how you look up one day and your baby girl is telling you not to embarrass her. I didn't mention Claire by name. I didn't tell the story about how she used to fall asleep on my chest while I read her Goodnight Moon, or how she once sang Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in front of a gas station cashier because she wanted to make his day better. I didn't say anything about the treehouse I built her with my own hands, or the way she cried when we moved away from her childhood home. I kept it short, polite, safe. The applause was gentle, mostly from the teachers and a few other grandparents who probably recognized the same cautious dance I was doing. I sat back down in the seat beside Noah, who beamed up at me like I'd just come back from the moon. He leaned his head on my shoulder. I put my arm around him, gently. Claire didn't say anything else for the rest of the event. Afterward, she thanked Mrs. Palmer, shook hands with other parents, made small talk with Daniel about brunch reservations. I stood there awkwardly for a few minutes until it became clear I wasn't part of the plan. When I offered to ride with them to the cafe, Claire gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Oh, it's just going to be the 3 of us today. Noah has a play date right after." Daniel nodded, like this had already been decided. Noah looked confused. He started to protest, but Claire cut him off with a practiced tone. "We've already talked about this, sweetheart." The house was quiet when I got in. I made coffee I didn't want and sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at the same Formica countertop Claire used to draw pictures on with crayons. Her initials were still scratched into the side of the wooden stool near the fridge, a little CW, uneven and bold. I'd never sanded it out. I wondered what version of me she saw when she looked at me now. Was it the man who'd sewn her Halloween costume by hand? Or was it someone else entirely? A relic? An inconvenience? A wild card she had to manage? Maybe I had embarrassed her before. Maybe there were things I'd said or done in the past that made her cringe. I tried to remember. Had I ever told an off-color joke at a dinner party? Had I once spoken too long, gone on too much, gotten something wrong? I couldn't recall. And yet, she remembered something, or feared something. The coffee went cold. I didn't drink it. That night, I lay in bed with the lights off, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Composed, smiling, distant, and behind it, the echo of a daughter I remembered. A little girl who used to draw me as a superhero with a cape and a big smile. Now, apparently, I was someone she had to keep from speaking in public. And somehow, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't always someone my daughter had to manage. There was a time when Claire couldn't fall asleep unless she was curled up on my chest, breathing in rhythm with my heartbeat, one tiny hand tangled in the fabric of my shirt, like she was anchoring herself to the world. I used to carry her from the couch to her bed after she fell asleep during movie nights, tiptoeing like a thief past the creaky hallway floorboard. Even now, decades later, I still avoid that floorboard out of habit. She used to call me Super Dad. I don't remember where the nickname came from. Maybe something from a Saturday morning cartoon or a book we read a dozen times over. But once it stuck, she said it constantly. Super Dad, can you open this jar? Super Dad, can we have pancakes again? Super Dad, come look at this weird bug. I'd play along, puffing out my chest, pretending to lift heavy objects with exaggerated grunts, making her laugh until she had to hold her sides. She had the kind of laugh that bounced off walls and made you feel lucky just to be alive near it. Her mother left when Claire was 5, walked out with a suitcase and a kind of calm that terrified me, more than any shouting ever could. There was no fight, no dramatic scene, just a long silence, and then a car engine starting. Claire watched her go from the window, her hand pressed flat against the glass. She didn't cry. Not that day. That came later. 2 nights later, to be exact, when she asked if her mom would be home in time for her ballet recital. And I had to tell her no. That night, she cried so hard she made herself sick. I sat on the bathroom floor with her, stroking her back and whispering that I was still there, that I'd always be there. And I was. God help me, I was. I learned how to braid hair, how to shop for tights and leotards, how to sew loose sequins onto recital dresses. I watched The Little Mermaid more times than should be legally allowed. I packed school lunches with handwritten notes that said, "You're braver than you think," and left them in her lunchbox even through middle school, when I knew she'd probably just roll her eyes and throw them away. I didn't care. Maybe she didn't read them. But I needed her to know, just in case. We were close. For a long time, it was just the two of us, Team Edward and Claire. I was a young father then, 32 when she was born, still figuring out my own life while trying to hold hers together. We didn't have much. I worked long hours managing a hardware store and took side gigs, fixing fences and clearing out basements just to keep up. Every penny was stretched until it squealed, but I made it work. She always had new shoes at the start of the school year, always had a warm coat when winter rolled in. She never knew how many bills I paid late just so she could go on the 8th grade science trip to D.C. She was proud of me then. I know she was. She'd introduced me to her teachers with this look on her face like I was somebody, like I was important. She used to draw pictures of us holding hands with little captions underneath that said things like, "Me and Daddy at the park," or "Best day ever." There's a shoebox in my bedroom closet with at least 50 of those drawings. I don't look at them often anymore. They hurt in a way I can't explain, like being homesick for a place that doesn't exist anymore. Somewhere between high school and law school, something changed. At first, it was small. Phone calls returned less quickly. Hugs that lasted one beat too short. A kind of distracted air about her, like I was still in the room, but no longer quite in focus. Then came Daniel. I don't blame him entirely. That would be too easy. He was charming, I suppose, in that polished way some people are when they've been handed everything and don't even realize it. He was already a third-year associate at a firm when they met, drove a sleek black car, never took off his watch, smiled without showing teeth. From the very first handshake, I could feel his calculation. The way he looked at me, like I was a harmless prop in some life he was staging. Claire changed faster after they got engaged. Her voice sharpened, her wardrobe hardened, and suddenly my stories weren't funny anymore. My advice was old-fashioned. She started correcting me gently in conversations, then not so gently. Once I called a client of hers by the wrong title at a dinner party, and she corrected me mid-sentence. "Dad, it's Dr. Chen, not Mr." Right in front of everyone, I laughed it off, but inside, I shrank a little. When she landed a senior counsel position, she invited me to the celebration dinner, but didn't seat me at her table. Said it was more efficient for networking. I ended up sitting with 2 junior associates and a catering rep who spent most of the night scrolling on his phone. I tried not to take it personally. She was busy. The event was about her, after all. I told myself that over and over, while I watched her clink glasses with Daniel's parents. I started to feel like a guest star in her life, brought out for holidays and school events, positioned carefully, then tucked away again when the credits rolled. I told myself I was imagining things, that she still loved me, just didn't know how to show it anymore, that Daniel's influence would pass, that she was just in a busy season, as she always said. I believed it until last week, when she pulled me aside and whispered those words like a warning. "Don't embarrass me." There was no affection behind it, no twinkle in her eye. Just control, just distance. That night, I pulled the old photo album from the bookshelf, the big red one with our adventures, scrawled across the front in her 6-year-old handwriting. It was falling apart at the edges. The binding had cracked in 2 places, and one of the pages had water damage from an old roof leak. Still, I flipped through it for hours. Pictures of us at the pumpkin patch, her first sleepover, her science fair project on volcanoes, where I stayed up until 2 a.m. helping her make the baking soda mixture erupt on cue, her high school graduation, the day we moved her into her first apartment. She looked happy in all of them, and in most of those photos, I'm standing beside her, smiling like a man who thought being a good father was enough. Like someone who believed love, if given honestly and consistently, could never be misplaced. I wish that were true. But sometimes, love goes unanswered. Not because it wasn't good enough, but because the person receiving it decides somewhere along the way that they've outgrown it. The invitation came by email. Not a phone call, not a handwritten card, not even a text. Just a cold, 4-sentence email titled, "Firm Dinner, Formal Attire Required." "Hi, Dad. Daniel's firm is hosting a dinner at the Harrington Club this Friday night. We've got a seat for you at our table. It's important to him. Please dress appropriately. Jacket and tie required. Claire." That last line stuck out more than the rest. Please dress appropriately. I stared at those words for several minutes, reading them again and again, not sure why they hit so hard. Like I was a teenager getting scolded before a school dance. Like my presence came with a warning label. I hadn't responded right away. I wasn't sure I would go, but the part that said, "It's important to him," kept needling at me. I wasn't sure what that meant, why Daniel of all people suddenly wanted me at some high-profile event. But I figured if they were willing to make room at their table, I could at least show up. I went to the dry cleaner, dug my old navy blazer out of the back of the closet, the one I hadn't worn since Claire's engagement dinner. Had to let the waist out of the matching trousers. I even polished my shoes, something I hadn't done in years. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving and tried to see what she would see. An old man, yes, but clean-shaven, straight-backed, dressed with care. A father trying. The Harrington Club was the kind of place where the valet looks at your car before he looks at you. The lobby smelled like cologne and old money. Marble floors, a chandelier the size of a small SUV. Everyone there looked like they belonged. Tailored suits, sleek dresses, shoes that clicked when they walked, not scuffed along the floor. Claire was already there when I arrived, standing beside Daniel near the entrance to the dining room. She wore a sleeveless black dress and pearl earrings, her hair pulled into a tight twist. She looked flawless, like a magazine ad come to life. But when she saw me, her expression faltered for half a second. "You wore that tie," she said, not as a compliment. I looked down at it. A simple burgundy tie with a subtle paisley pattern. One Claire had given me years ago for Father's Day. I thought it was a nice touch. Apparently not. "It's fine," she added quickly. "Let's go inside." Daniel didn't say anything, just gave me a brief nod. One of those nods that people use when shaking hands would be too personal. The room was loud, with the hum of networking conversation and silverware clinking against glass. We were seated at a round table with 4 other people, 2 lawyers from Daniel's firm and their partners. Everyone introduced themselves with perfect white-tooth smiles and firm handshakes. They all had that manicured confidence, the kind that says, "I've never eaten fast food in my car." I tried to follow the conversations, but they were thick with references I didn't recognize. Corporate clients, litigation wins, offshore holdings. Claire laughed easily, tossing out names I'd never heard of. Stories from the courtroom that made everyone smile like they were in on something. Daniel spoke in a calm, detached voice, like a man giving a TED Talk to people already on his side. At one point, someone asked me what I did before retirement. "I ran a hardware store for 26 years, I said, lifting my wine glass for a polite sip. "Cars fix it. We were the last independent supply store in West Haven before the Lowe's moved in." There was a brief pause. One of the women nodded politely, then turned to Daniel and asked about a recent case involving corporate real estate in Chicago. Just like that, I was edited out of the room. Claire gave me a tight smile, her hand barely grazing my forearm under the table. "Let's keep things light, Dad," she murmured. "This isn't really the place for nostalgia." Nostalgia. The word dropped like ice water down my spine. We hadn't even reached the entrees yet. Later, during dessert, Daniel started telling a story about a judge mispronouncing a Latin phrase in court. Everyone laughed. I smiled politely, even though I didn't get the joke. Then, without even looking up from his espresso, he added, "Claire says, your stories used to be epic, Edward. Like bedtime sagas, with 3 acts and a morale." That made me look up. Claire was already shaking her head, her smile tense. He's exaggerating. My dad could turn a trip to the grocery store into a 4-part drama. More polite laughter. More raised eyebrows around the table. And that's when she said it. Honestly, he could talk for hours about things no one else remembers. Right, Dad? The words hit me like a shove. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What was I supposed to say? I'd been invited, seated, polished up like a trophy, and now I was a punchline, a talking point. A relic trotted out to round out the scene. The same man who once held her on his shoulders for 3 straight hours at the county fair was now nostalgia. I made it through the rest of the meal without saying much. When the evening ended, Claire hugged me quickly at the valet line. Daniel shook my hand the way a surgeon might hold a scalpel, briefly and without warmth. "We'll be in touch," Claire said, already looking over my shoulder at someone more important. I walked out into the cold without waiting for my car. Just started walking. It was a long way back to where I parked, 5 blocks at least, and I didn't care. The night air cleared my lungs in a way that nothing in that dining room could. My shoes pinched. My knees ached. The polished soles scuffed along the sidewalk, breaking rhythm on a loose piece of pavement that nearly made me trip. I stopped at a diner, ordered black coffee, sat in a booth alone and stared at the reflections in the window of other people eating in pairs, laughing, sharing something I'd once had and now only remembered. I thought about Claire's tone, the way she said, "Dad," like it was a leash she was holding on to just a little too tightly. I didn't cry. I don't do that anymore. But I stared down at my tie, the one she gave me all those years ago, and wondered when exactly I became someone she had to apologize for. And more importantly, why I'd let that happen. The photo album wasn't fancy. It wasn't leather-bound or professionally printed or crafted with gold-foiled lettering. Just a wide, old 3-ring binder with a denim fabric cover and frayed edges where the seams had started to loosen. The front had a faded sticker, half peeled, of a smiling sun wearing sunglasses. Claire had stuck it there herself when she was 8. Underneath, she'd written in crooked black Sharpie, "Our Adventures." I hadn't opened it in years. It sat on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, next to a stack of tax folders and a shoebox full of her kindergarten drawings. I used to take it out on her birthdays, sometimes on Father's Day, when the house felt too quiet. But since she'd started keeping her distance, even those occasions felt too raw, too fragile. I pulled it down on a Wednesday. No occasion. No reason. I'd been dusting, avoiding the ache in my chest left behind after that dinner at the Harrington Club. Claire's laugh still echoed in my mind, thin, calculated, half hollow, like she was playing a role and I was just an outdated line in her script. The photo album felt heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just carrying too much invisible weight these days. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping it open slowly. Inside, time waited patiently for me. Claire's face, frozen at different ages, stared back from every page. There she was, standing in the driveway with a popsicle-stained mouth, holding a sparkler with both hands like it might fly away. A page later, her Halloween costume from 3rd grade. Hand-stitched wings, a glittery wand, crooked plastic tiara. I remembered burning my fingers on the glue gun, trying to fix that damn crown after she fell and cracked it on the sidewalk. Every photo brought something back. Her toothless grin at age 7, kneeling beside a science fair project I stayed up all night helping her finish. Her look of pure triumph, holding a basketball trophy after a game I almost missed because of a late delivery truck at the store. The way she clung to my arm at her middle school graduation. head resting against my sleeve like she never wanted to let go. I kept turning pages. Camp photos, birthday parties, beach trips. Each one a reminder of how closely we used to orbit each other. How many versions of her I had known, joyful, curious, frightened, determined, and how much of myself I had poured into helping her become the woman she was. And yet, somewhere along the line, she'd outgrown the need for this kind of father. Or maybe not outgrown, maybe discarded. That night, I stayed up late, assembling something I hadn't done in years. I bought a fresh album, simple, clean, gray cloth cover. I printed new photos, scans of the old ones, plus a few digital shots I'd saved from her social media pages. Claire graduating from law school, Claire holding newborn Noah, Claire cutting a ribbon at a courthouse event. I organized them chronologically, from babyhood to adulthood, childhood laughter to polished smiles. And in between each decade, I slipped in a letter. Not long, just a page or two. Typed, printed, folded with care. Letters she'd never read, but needed to exist. In them, I told her what I remembered, how I felt watching her grow up, what it cost me, and what I'd do again without hesitation. I admitted to mistakes, times I was too tired to listen, too distracted to be present, too stubborn to apologize. And in the last one, I told her that I missed her. Not the adult version sitting beside Daniel at networking events. Not the woman with the perfect wardrobe and carefully modulated tone. I missed the girl who once built pillow forts with me and called me super dad without irony. I missed her, like someone misses a childhood home that's been bulldozed. The memory survives, but the place is gone. I wrapped the album in tissue paper, found a box in the garage that fit just right, hand-wrote her name on the label, Claire Whitman, and the next day I dropped it off at her house while she was at work. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to explain what it was. I just wanted her to have it, a gesture, a lifeline, a history. A week passed. Then two. No reply, no call, no text. I didn't expect a parade, but I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd at least say thank you. 3 weeks later, I went over to her house unannounced. Daniel wasn't home. Claire answered the door in a blazer, Bluetooth still in one ear, holding a clipboard like I'd caught her in the middle of managing the entire world. "Dad," she said, confused. "I just wanted to drop something off for Noah," I said, lifting the little wrapped package of books I'd brought for him. "I won't stay long." She hesitated, then opened the door. "Let me in." Her home looked like a showroom. Everything white, polished, sparse. No clutter, no warmth. A few family pictures on the sideboard. One of Daniel's parents in matching golf sweaters. Another of Claire and Noah at the zoo. None of me. She stepped into the kitchen to take a work call. I waited in the hallway, unsure if I was still welcome. And that's when I saw it. The box. The one I'd wrapped her photo album in. It was tucked behind the coat rack near the entryway closet. Not in a place of honor. Not even opened. The wrapping paper had a small tear in the corner, like someone had started to open it, then changed their mind, or didn't care enough to finish. I stood there, staring at it. The box was collecting dust. She hadn't even looked inside. I didn't say anything. When she returned, I handed her the books for Noah, smiled, and said I had errands to run. She barely noticed when I left. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off. Not angry, not even hurt exactly. Just hollow. Like the world had quietly confirmed something I'd tried not to believe. You can give someone your whole heart, your time, your stories, your sweat, your sacrifices. You can build their childhood with your bare hands, and still, they might set all of it aside like junk mail in the hallway. And you know what? They have every right to. But you also have the right to stop trying to prove you were worth remembering. I didn't plan to say anything. The event was for Noah, a school play. Something about explorers or pioneers. I never quite caught the title. Claire had mentioned it only in passing, as if it were an obligation, not a celebration. But Noah had called me himself a few days earlier, voice crackling with excitement. "You have to come, Grandpa. I'm Lewis, from Lewis and Clark. I even get to wear a hat." So I put on my brown sport coat, the one Claire said looked a little too lived in, and showed up 40 minutes early, sitting alone in the third row of the auditorium, while parents trickled in. Claire and Daniel arrived 10 minutes before curtain. Her phone in her hand, Daniel's blazer dusted with expensive cologne and disinterest. I smiled at them both. Claire gave me a nod. That was all. The play was fine. Adorable, even. Noah was easily the most engaged actor on the stage. He projected louder than the rest, his costume slightly crooked, his enthusiasm unwavering. I watched him with pride swelling so full in my chest, it felt like it might burst through my ribs. When he spotted me in the audience, he grinned, big and goofy, and gave me a little wave before the curtain dropped. That one wave made the whole week worth it. After the show, the school hosted a small reception in the gym. Paper cups of lemonade, store-bought cookies on plastic platters, parents taking pictures, kids running around with their name tags still pinned to their chests. I spotted Noah first. He saw me and sprinted across the room, arms flailing, hat bouncing on his head. "You came!" he shouted, launching himself into my arms. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo." Claire approached a few minutes later, phone still in hand, thumbs typing. She smiled at Noah, but it looked rehearsed. Daniel hovered behind her, like a security detail, already checking his watch. "We should get a family photo," Claire said suddenly, snapping her fingers. "For the school newsletter." "Sure," I said, stepping closer. But then, without looking at me, she turned to one of the teachers and gestured toward the backdrop near the bleachers. "Hi, could we just grab a quick picture? Just the three of us, Daniel, Noah, and me." The teacher glanced at me, confused. I was still standing there. Claire didn't even flinch. Just the three of us. My mouth opened, then closed. I looked at Noah, who was watching me with his brow furrowed. He looked between me and Claire, confused. "Can't Grandpa be in the picture?" he asked. Claire gave a small, tight laugh. "Let's just get one of the immediate family first, okay, sweetie?" Immediate family? The words tasted sour in my mouth. I stepped back, nodded politely. The teacher hesitated, but eventually followed Claire's cue, snapping a few shots while Daniel smiled with an arm around Claire's waist. I watched them pose, smiling, polished, complete. Then something inside me cracked. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was final. Like a pane of glass that had been holding under pressure for years, finally giving way. When the pictures were done, Claire turned back to me, as if I might still be standing there obediently, waiting for my moment. "Dad," she said, as if nothing had happened, "can you take a picture of us with the principal?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. Instead, I asked a question. One I hadn't planned. One I hadn't even realized was waiting to escape. "When did I become a footnote in your life, Claire?" Her expression froze. The smile disappeared. "I'm sorry." I took a step closer. My voice was steady, quiet. I wasn't trying to make a scene. "I drove you to every ballet class for 8 years. Stayed up sewing those itchy costumes you used to cry about. I built you a treehouse with a rope ladder that gave me a back spasm for 2 months. And now I'm not even part of the family photo? Dad, she said quickly, eyes darting around. This isn't the place. No, I said. It never is. That's the point. Daniel stepped forward. Maybe we should have this conversation another time. Daniel, I said, looking at him for the first time that evening. If I wanted to hear from you, I'd turn on cable news. He blinked, didn't say another word. Claire crossed her arms, defensive, tense. You're making a scene. No, I said. I'm finally refusing to disappear. The room had grown quieter. I didn't care. I was the father who showed up, the one who paid for everything, who sacrificed, who bent himself backwards to give you a life without worry. I didn't expect applause. I didn't expect a medal. But I didn't expect to be erased. Claire's voice dropped into a low hiss. You're embarrassing yourself. There it was again. The old standby. The one she used to keep me in line. The one she whispered at the school assembly. The one that still haunted me. I took a breath. Looked at her for what felt like the first time in years. Not as my daughter, but as the woman she'd chosen to become. I'm not embarrassed, I said. I'm heartbroken. She didn't speak. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I looked at Noah, who was clutching the hem of her jacket, his little brow furrowed. You did great today, buddy, I said softly, crouching beside him. You were the best Lewis I've ever seen. He nodded slowly, then whispered, Are you mad? No, I said, my voice catching. Not at you. Never at you. I hugged him tightly. He clung to me like he wasn't ready to let go. Then I stood and turned back to Claire. I won't be coming to any more dinners or events. Not unless I'm actually invited. Not unless I'm seen. You're being dramatic, she snapped. I shook my head. I'm being honest. Something you haven't been with me in a long time. And with that, I walked out of the gym, into the cold night air, into the kind of silence that felt more like truth than any words exchanged inside. I didn't slam doors. There were no screaming matches, no ultimatums, no late-night voicemails or dramatic letters scrawled in pen and folded into mailboxes. I simply went home, made a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time while the kettle whistled itself cold on the stove. Somewhere between the second and third sip, I understood what I had to do. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was something quieter, heavier. The slow closing of a door that had remained open far too long. That night, I pulled the heavy green binder from the desk drawer in my home office, the one marked estate planning in block letters across the spine. Claire's name was all over it. She was the executor of my will, the sole beneficiary, the one entrusted with handling everything: property, bank accounts, personal items, even Noah's college fund. The plan had been written when she was still in law school. I remember her eyes lighting up when I first told her. It's a lot of responsibility, I'd said, but I trust you. Back then, I thought that meant something. I'd updated it a few times over the years. Minor changes, adjusted values, switched out a life insurance policy. But the structure always stayed the same. Claire gets everything. Claire handles the rest. I thought I was being generous. Now I realized I'd just been naive. The lawyer's office was quiet. No music, no receptionist making small talk. Just Margaret Thompson, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, sitting behind a polished oak desk that had probably seen more heartbreak than most therapists. She took off her reading glasses and looked at me after I finished explaining. "Mr. Carr," she said, "this isn't an impulsive decision, is it?" "No, ma'am, it's a long time coming." "Any abuse? Financial pressure? Emotional threats?" "Not in the legal sense," I said. "Just a slow erosion, like rust on metal. You don't notice it until the whole thing starts to crumble." She nodded once, then reached for her notepad. "Let's begin." By the time I left her office that afternoon, the new plan was in motion. Claire's name was gone from every page. Every account, every asset, every investment that once bore her name was redirected elsewhere. A scholarship fund was created in Noah's name, set up to activate when he turned 18. It wouldn't be accessible by Claire or Daniel. Not a dime. Margaret called it an education trust with layered protections. I just called it peace of mind. The house would go to a historical preservation society. I'd been talking to them for years about restoring the old place someday. Now, it was in writing. They'd use it as a local archive and learning center. That felt right. As for my savings, my retirement, and the life insurance, half would be divided between charities I'd quietly supported for decades, youth outreach programs, local literacy centers, veterans aid. The other half would be placed in a private fund to cover the long-term care Jessica might need if her health ever declined. Because if there was anyone in this world who had earned security, it was the woman who loved me through 38 years of storms. Claire called 4 days later. Her voice was clipped. Not angry, not confused, just tight. "I heard you went to Margaret Thompson." "I did." There was a pause. Then the sound of her exhaling sharply through her nose, like she was trying to push the anger out without letting it slip through her voice. "And you made changes to the will?" "Yes." "What kind of changes?" "The kind that don't include people who treat me like a burden." Another silence. Then, "Is this because of the school event?" "It's because of the last 10 years, Claire." Her voice shifted then, softening in a way I recognized all too well. The manipulation voice. The voice she used when she wanted something, but didn't want to ask outright. "Dad, you know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me, for Noah, for all of us." "I used to believe that," I said. "Now I'm not so sure." She didn't speak for a while. I waited. Let her stew in the silence she'd so often used against me. Then, "I don't understand. I thought we were fine." "You don't understand because you never noticed. You only see me when I'm useful. That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is being erased from your life while still being expected to fund it." She scoffed. "This is insane. So you're just cutting me out of everything?" "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference." "And you think that makes you a good father?" "No," I said. "But it makes me an honest man, and I can live with that." I hung up before she could reply, and I sat in the quiet afterward, letting the finality sink in. My heart wasn't pounding, my palms weren't sweaty. I wasn't overcome with guilt or rage or vindication. I just felt steady, like I'd finally stepped out from under a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Claire didn't call again. Not that day, not the next, not even the next week. I expected a message, an email, maybe a letter from her lawyer, but none came. She was too proud to beg, too smart to fight a will written as airtight as Margaret's, and too distant to care. At least not yet. Maybe someday she'd understand what she lost. Maybe not. But that was no longer my burden to carry. That weekend, I stood in the garage sorting through boxes I hadn't opened in years. I found an old tape recorder Claire had used for a school project in 10th grade. There was a single cassette still inside, labeled in her handwriting, "Interview with Dad." I dug out an old boombox from the closet, blew the dust from the speakers, and pressed play. Her voice came through first. Young, bright, curious. "Okay, Dad. What does being a father mean to you?" Then mine, after a brief chuckle. Well, I guess it means showing up, even when you're tired, even when you don't have the answers. It means being someone your child can lean on until they can stand on their own. Claire giggled in the background. "That's so cheesy." "Maybe," I said, "but it's the truth." The tape ended a few minutes later. Static, then silence. I didn't cry, but I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet, letting the memory rest gently on my shoulders. The world hadn't ended. My life wasn't shattered. I was still here, still standing, still whole. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like a father again, just not hers. Spring came slowly that year, as if the world itself was tired of trying. The last frost clung to the corners of the yard, like a memory that refused to melt. The dogwood tree in the front lawn bloomed later than usual, its pink-white flowers arriving in scattered clusters instead of the full cascade I'd come to expect. The daffodils pushed through the soil timidly, like they were testing the world before committing to color. I found myself spending more time in the garden. There was comfort in the rhythm of it, the kneeling, the digging, the pruning, the quiet repetition of tending to something that couldn't talk back, couldn't measure your worth against its own expectations. The soil didn't care how many law degrees your child had. It only asked for water, patience, and your hands in the dirt. It had been 2 months since I changed the will. 2 months since Claire had called, since I'd drawn the line that should have been drawn years ago. I hadn't heard from her since. Not a text, not an email, not a passive-aggressive holiday card. I didn't expect one. That part of me, the part that waited for her to come around, to soften, to remember who I was, had finally gone quiet. It hadn't died. It had simply gone to sleep, like a porch light left on for too many nights, with no one ever coming home. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered by the mail carrier, who knocked gently on the door and smiled as he handed it over. "Looks like it was dropped off at the wrong address last week," he said. "Neighbor just passed it along." The envelope was pale blue. My name written in pencil, with rounded handwriting I didn't recognize at first. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. "Dear Grandpa, I'm sorry we haven't seen you in a long time. I don't know why, but Mom doesn't like when I ask. I miss you. I still have the rock you gave me with the weird fossil in it. It's on my windowsill. I told my teacher you taught me about trilobites. She didn't know what those were. I told her you know everything. Love, Noah. P.S. I made a picture of us in class. You have a blue shirt. I'll give it to you next time." The page trembled in my hands, not from the cold, not from age, but from everything it didn't say. Noah didn't know about the will, or the inheritance, or the fracture that had cracked his family in half. He just missed his grandfather. He remembered a rock, a word, a shared moment that meant nothing to anyone else, but meant the world to him. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote him back. A real letter, on paper, with ink that smudged when I leaned on it the wrong way. Dear Noah, thank you for your letter. It meant more to me than you'll ever know. Trilobites were one of the first creatures to have eyes. That means they were among the first living things to ever look at the world. Can you imagine that? You and I have something in common with them. We're both learning how to see. I miss you too, a lot. I hope one day soon we can sit on the porch again, eat popsicles and talk about space rocks and other important things. Until then, I'm always thinking of you. Always. Love, Grandpa. P.S. I still have the hat from your play. I kept it, just in case. I sealed the envelope and walked it to the mailbox under the porch light. The air smelled like rain. The clouds above were thick with it, but the drops hadn't started falling yet. The world was holding its breath. So was I. A week later, I opened my computer and clicked on a file labeled Claire, Grandparents' Day Speech. It had sat untouched on my desktop since that day at the school. The speech I never gave. The words I'd prepared but never read. I'd written it simply, sincerely, just a few paragraphs. But now, I needed to see them again. I clicked it open and read it slowly, aloud to myself. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. I never gave that speech, but maybe that didn't matter anymore. Maybe just writing it, just meaning it, was enough. Claire didn't reply to my letter, not that I expected her to. Daniel made no attempt to reach out either. No legal threats, no veiled remarks through extended family, just silence. Long, clean silence. It felt good. I'd spent years believing that love required proof, that you had to keep earning it, keep pouring yourself out, keep apologizing for your existence to people who could no longer see the value in it. But Noah's letter proved otherwise. The people who matter don't need convincing. They just need you to be there. So I stayed where I was, in my little house with the uneven floorboards and the leaky faucet I never quite got around to fixing. I spent mornings in the garden, afternoons reading the paper, evenings with a pot of tea and the memories that no one could take from me anymore. And every so often, I'd pull out the drawing Noah finally gave me in a blue shirt, standing beside him in his explorer costume, both of us smiling under a cartoon sun. It was taped to the fridge, right beneath a magnet that said, "You are still growing, even when no one notices." If Claire ever reaches out again, I'll be polite. I'll listen. I'll nod. I may even smile. But I won't open the door all the way back up, not this time. Some doors stay closed, not out of anger, but because peace lives on the other side.